Good afternoon. It is the top of the hour. This is Marjorie from PACE. We'd like to give our other participants just a few minutes to join us. I'm hoping that within the next minute or two, we'll have a full load. So if you want to just sit back and relax, give us a couple of minutes here, let a few more folks join in before we start. I'll give the green light when it's time to start. All right, welcome to the PACE-hosted webinar entitled Stop Living in the Past, Making the Switch from a Reactive to Proactive Call Center. This webinar is sponsored and presented by Wyndham Professionals. For those of you who don't know me, I am Marjorie Godfrey, VP of Business Development for PACE, and will serve as your moderator today. As we prepare to begin, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to inform you of. This webinar is being recorded. All lines are muted to avoid background noise. Please mute your computer mics and speakers to avoid any echo feedback. We'll be taking questions at the end of today's presentation, so please feel free to type any into the chat box located on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll attempt to answer all questions today, and those we don't get to, we will respond to via email. At this time, please allow me to introduce our speaker, Chris Renendez. He is Chief Commercial Officer of Wyndham Professionals. We'll talk a bit about his career journey and objectives before the presentation. Chris?
Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. I wanted to take a couple minutes first and just thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak. I think what you hear today is probably information you've heard in the past and probably things you're already working on. But it's a compilation of what I've learned from the folks I've worked with for the past 15 years. And really the levers that I can identify with that help to drive the sorts of benefits in customer service, customer satisfaction, and certainly revenue and cost management that we all look for. So we'll look for that. Hopefully we'll uncover a couple of things, and I encourage anyone with more insights that I can steal and then present to other people to go ahead and give those to me as they see fit, either through emails and chat or go ahead and come off mute. So I'm going to go ahead and drive here. So my objectives for today are three, and I think three objectives is a lot for a call as well as for a year, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move through the presentation. But the first is let's try to understand what customers want. I mean that at the macro level. Let's establish a baseline for improvement. So once we know what they want, let's figure out how to give it to them and how far from that we are. And then last is really to drive revenue and retention. I think I can bring some of those points to light based on my background. I worked for about 8 years at a company called Amdocs, where I ran their Clarify business, which is a call center technology, and worked in implementing call center IS for a number of large telcos and some cable companies, as well as some of the banks. In addition, I've been was at Convergys for 8 years after that, and I was lucky enough to be chosen to come to Wyndham Professionals with my former COO, who's now the CEO, and manage the commercial aspects of the business as well as sales and marketing. I spend all my time helping my folks align with our customers' strategic goals of driving revenue, reducing costs, and increasing customer retention and lifetime value. And someone put on there I was in the Marine Corps. I was in the Marine Corps for 20 years prior to that. So what do customers want? I think this will not be an epiphany to anyone, but I think what we need to recognize is that the one thing they don't want is they generally don't want to call us. And I think when we can level set with ourselves that customers aren't really looking for reasons to call the call center and talk to us, I think that's a good place to begin. So what they really want is some kind of proactive customer service. They want us to be able to identify what they need before they even need it and present it to them in the channel or the format that they want, and they want it easy. The strategic plan sometimes doesn't align with that, right? So the common theme from the executive level usually is let's reduce costs, let's increase revenue at the same time, and then let's improve customer satisfaction. And I think we know that those three things are sometimes at odds with each other. So in order to reduce costs, it's difficult sometimes to improve the customer experience. That often takes focus, it takes investment, and it takes time. So in order to reduce total cost of service, we certainly have to look at efficiencies and reduce waste, but we've also got to consider a high quality and consistent service level to our customers. We've got to make sure we're profitable, and then we've got to measure those silly acronyms like CSAT and NPS and lifetime value to see that we're getting the right return on our investment with our customers. If you take a quick look at my Meet Your Customer slide, I mean, this is generally what most of our customers want today, right? They want proactive service. They want easy-to-use access to all their information and all the things that they might want to purchase or be served by through our organizations. They want to be able to log in through self-serve technologies and even proactive technologies that deliver information before they want it, before they even ask for it. So if you've ever logged into FedEx and you've got a FedEx account, I think we're all used to FedEx kind of presenting us with the status of our current shipment. Or if anyone's a member of a large primary military insurance and banking organization out of Texas, you know that when you log on there, they're going to ask you if you want to talk about your open claim or you want to call about a specific note or loan. And so there is this notion of knowing who you are and presenting some likely information to you. And then last is, how do we analyze this? How do we make sure that these things are working? How do we match that stuff up with Net Promoter Score and with customer affinity or even retention and attrition? And you can see here that, the common theme of the customer is, we'd like to say that they're a longtime customer. They've definitely got, this is a person that knows what she wants. She wants her offers and service delivered to her proactively. And more importantly, she's probably on a wireless device. So, we need to make sure that from an infrastructure perspective, we build everything parametrically that can be delivered both through the web as well as through a wireless device. And I think even on top of that, we need to make sure that things are coordinated across all those channels. Any questions or comments on kind of channels and how the customer interacts with us today and what they want? Okay. So what do they really want? They want to be first, right? I have a couple of different engagements or customer relationships that I have. I'm a Delta Airlines Diamond guy just because I get stuck in an airplane a lot. And I belong to USAA, as I alluded before. And at any given time, I know what my membership numbers are out of those two organizations. For some unknown reason, I know my Delta Sky Miles number, and I always know my USAA member number. Part of it is I've been a member of USAA for 33 years, but I also, use them a lot, and it means something to me. So I've assigned a specific value to knowing that information. And we want to be that important to our customers, and it's tough to do, but one of the ways to do that is to be customer-centric. To sort of proactively serve up and deliver their needs before they want them, as I said before, to give them the technologies they need to make it easy. And in some cases, they'd rather talk to a live person, especially when they're not getting the love they want and the solutions they want out of a particular self-service technology. And then last, they want great customer service. We did a survey about 8 years ago at my former organization where, there's always been this, challenge for offshoring and nearshoring and onshoring, where I think folks normally would or generally think that if it's in my language, I would much prefer it to be answered and take the call in my language, and I would much prefer to deal with someone and wait longer to have it in the language I want. And that we found is actually not correct. What people really want is someone that serves their needs in a rapid fashion. They resolve the call. I know we all hopefully are measuring first call resolution. They resolve the call in the most fastidious and efficient way possible. And language really wasn't that much of a difference. As a matter of fact, the difference between the Philippines, India, and nearshore over the United States was within a half of a percentage point. It was not a lot. And this was measuring a great call versus a good call versus a bad call. So what does that really tell us? It doesn't mean let's send everything to India or let's send everything to the Philippines or to Costa Rica. But what it means is let's focus on solving the customer's problem in the call and maybe not so much worry about where the call is coming from, but that we have the right trained agent with the right tools and technology in front of them to solve the customer's problems. Any comments on that? Okay. I know you're all on mute, so it's fun to ask questions and not be able to get answers. So let's talk about technology for a second, because I think we all know that technology can be a great efficiency driver, and it also can be an incredible multiplier of problems. So there's two types of technologies that we sort of think about at Wyndham. The first is the reason we're talking about channel of choice. I stole that little phrase from an EVP at a company I did business with a few years ago, where he said, I'm tired of providing a channel of voice. I want to provide one of choice. So being able to give them, the customer, whatever channel they want to interact with. And I think it's important to also do something really crazy and actually ask the customers what channels they want. So important as you move forward, if you haven't already done this, and I'm sure you've laid a lot of the groundwork or are already optimizing this, it's important to ask for verbatims and really identify what's best for the customer, because sometimes they're using channels that they may not prefer. It's just one that they find the easiest to work with. The next is to understand which are the self-service / really proactive customer service technologies. So being able to push out through outbound IVRs and inbound IVR, delivering portals and certainly apps, leveraging new technologies like voice identification, voice authentication. And these are the kinds of things that really can drive efficiency and can give your customers the affinity that they're looking for. Again, being able to log on to my bank and actually submit it to a voice print so that when I get on the phone, they just ask me to say a phrase like Peter Piper, picked a pack of pickles or whatever, and they know it's me just based on a voice print. So those are nice things, and it also helps with fraud as well. I think I'm still driving. Yep. So let's establish a baseline first. I'm going to skip ahead one slide and just talk about call driver analysis, because this is really kind of the basis where improvements occur. Really to take a statistically valid sample of your calls and to analyze them and put them in the buckets that they belong in. These buckets may be based on products. They might be based on call type. They can be based on whatever way you differentiate your calls, maybe based on customers. If you've segmented the customers already, that might be an interesting way to create maybe call groups 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then segment the calls down by call type there. But it's important to really create an analysis and a taxonomy of what your calls are, and then be able to go back. I'm going to go back a slide. Let's identify where they're coming from. So sometimes we can look inside the four walls of the call center and see that we may be creating some of our own calls because of that acronym I talked about before, first call resolution. We're not driving a high first call resolution rate. The second reason is we may look outside the four walls of the call center, or maybe look upstream, and we might interact with our partners in marketing or in sales or in contracts or whatever other business units there are. And they may be either missetting expectations or delivering inaccurate information, or in general just creating some confusion that's driving calls to the call center. Because I think we all know that in the end, when the rubber hits the road, customer service is where the customer ends up when they're unhappy or they're looking for something. So really looking outside and then further downstream as well to look and see are there things that customers are doing that are creating their own problems and the ways that we can educate our customers and really train them. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but to train them to be more self-sufficient so that they don't have to go through this process. And what does that do for us, right? It helps us create a more proactive, more speaking customer base. It makes things more efficient, which helps us save money, which makes customers stay longer, which drives lifetime value. And then, the last piece is we need to be sober about this and understand that some calls are just going to be inefficient. They're going to show up anyway, and they're unavoidable. And they may have really long AHDs. They may be the most unhappy customers, et cetera. And what you'll find is as you begin to remove the calls that are sort of easy to get out of there, you'll see things like average handle time is going to go up, and you'll see that your overall customer satisfaction score from the call center will go down because the aggregate of what you're getting is really more of the bad and tougher calls as you get rid of the easier calls from the top of the stack. I'm going to slide past that. Now that we've identified where these calls are coming from and why, I think it's important then to really create a plot of how we're going to solve them. So some of these calls can be solved by, number one, maybe we add some technology to it that'll help drive a quicker response rate. But it's important to note what are the sort of technology and capabilities we have in-house, what are the things we can go find outside, and then what are the things that are more process enhancements and process re-engineering. So what I've done here is I've kind of plotted against cost savings and growth there on the left. And even though it's cut off in the slide, the bottom there is Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction. And so you can see here the larger circles are big bang, but they generally have, if the circle is large, it's a lot of effort. And so you can see there in this example, an IVR, although it's a lot of work in the top right, it has a big bang. But you can see some of the other things that are a little less work that are easy to implement. So it's important to sort of understand and inventory what's causing the calls, to identify what are the capabilities you require to lay over those processes and those customer needs, and then to plot them out. Find the low-hanging fruit, leverage that and implement them first. Certainly do some work to measure the ROI at the real expensive, more high-effort stuff. And then if you've got things that you think are really, really going to have an impact, work with some strategic partners and see if you can get them the coattails of a larger project. You can weave this in because generally everyone thinks that us in the customer service and call center are just a cost center, although we're going to talk a little bit more about how we turn that cost center into a revenue center. So analyze and adjust. I think analysis is the key to this. Even if you only implement one or two changes, it is so important to baseline and to measure some of the key metrics and KPIs that really drive efficiency and cost and revenue as well as customer value in the call center. Certainly churn is one of them. Really to be able to put the call types in a stack to understand how you really have an effect on each and every call type as you dissected the call volume. And then managing things like AAC and FCI. I think first call resolution and churn are two of the most important measures. And I think once you can link them, you can start to really drive some change in the call center. Implement the changes and measure. We have to, once we baseline, we've got to measure them and create that continuous improvement loop. And adjust the throttle is necessary. I was a pilot in the Marine Corps, and when I first was in flight school, one of the instructors told me one of the most important things to remember is when you move a switch in the airplane, if something bad happens, just put the switch back where it was. So I think that's an important thing to remember is that when you implement change, if things start to go bad, and this is really indicative of technology, how it can make things go bad faster, just watch what's happening and stop doing whatever you did to create that negative impact and then start again. You get a bigger bang for your buck sometimes with low cost, very simple things. I think training is huge. I think looking at hiring profiles is huge as you begin to change the way you deliver calls. Back to the kind of, it doesn't matter where you deliver it as long as you got the right person with the right tools in front of them. And then, things like being able to do simple process improvements where you can avoid some of the more pedantic steps that an agent might take and proactively serve up some of those simpler, more sort of direct information sort of bits to your customers in things like an IVR or even an email, or God forbid we use.
Chris, I do believe that we lost you again. We'll just go ahead and
You
wait
did.
a few seconds.
I'm back.
Here. Okay.
I'm back. I am literally sitting at my desk. I don't know what the problem is. But it is fun. I'm getting real quick at dialing your number, so that's good. So do the easy stuff first. We were talking about how to drive change quickly and easily. And then kind of going back to what are the calls that are just going to end up happening anyways and be inefficient. I think this is another place where it's sort of the sobriety helps. And that is, decide when you're dreaming or not. Looking at really big changes that you think are going to have a gigantic impact on customer service, customer sat, and volume and cost. I think it's important to really perform some pro forma analysis before you do things like that, especially when we're so one of those is, really to first of all send out some surveys, and again, as I said, simple ones. We'll identify those, and then to bring that survey information back in and build a business case to really move from reactive cost center to a proactive profit center. And the way that's done is to sit with your business partners and talk about what retention really means and what lifetime value is. And then from that point on, when you talk about the investment in loyalty and you talk about the investment in customer satisfaction, net promoter score, et cetera, we can begin to monetize what that investment is worth. So we know that as we move, say, NPS 1 point, we can begin to associate what that means from by the number of customers we may lose because of attrition, and then what that cost of acquisition is as well. So by saving these customers, by moving the needle on retention, we can then begin to bring into that math equation, hey, here's our average revenue, our ARPU per customer. We can add that in. We can begin to add in the acquisition cost of the customer because we know that's a lot. Some people say it's 5 times average revenue. And then we can also bring in average lifetime value and say that, hey, I've saved 1 year of Chris Resendiz. Their average customer stays 5. It cost me this much to go get another Chris Resendiz. So my overall savings is something greater than 1, right? The sum of the parts is much greater than the whole. And now we can begin to really build a business case that we can take to senior leadership and say, hey, investing in these types of technologies, this kind of process improvement, maybe even this wage rate to get better people, we can drive these kinds of business benefits that go to the bottom line for the company. So the desired outcomes, they're easy, right? We know what we want. We want to keep our customers longer, the good ones, right? And I think it's important to segment our customers so we can understand who the good ones are. And we want to grow them. We need to deliver that standard operating model that we can measure the outcomes of our change and performance. We need to think about what are the enabling technologies we want to deliver across them, and we need to make sure that we're always analyzing and delivering back feedback from the customer, as well as from inside the call center during mentoring and coaching, as well as QA and QC, so that we know what our changes and what our implementation of different technologies and processes is doing. And I think it's important to run this shows 2 years, but I think a 5-year analysis is important. I think it's important to pull in kind of a flat cost rate and amortize your costs of investments over those 5 years so that you can give senior leadership the projected costs that are flat, which is much easier for you to show your gains across. The last piece is that, this is the efficiency model, right? This is an example where an interaction where we had 1,200 folks performing the work of a specific volume. You can see as we reduce that volume through phase 1 of implementation of different types of technologies and processes. In phase 2, you can begin to really reduce the cost of the call center. And it's important to note that the line that you don't see here, which is going kind of diagonally through this, is the customer satisfaction line. That's how you box this in to make sure that you're not just reducing costs, you're reducing costs as well as increasing, at least maintaining, but increasing customer satisfaction. And you can also obviously draw another line through it, which is revenue. And I think when you can overlay those three KPIs or what I call levers, you can really begin to build a business case and get a lot of buy-in. I call it surround sound within the company that looks to help you become a more proactive and more revenue-driven organization rather than, unfortunately, the place that ends up dealing with all the problems and gets cost heaped on them. The last piece to talk about here is execution and accountability. And, I'm going to do a general pitch here for partners rather than just for Wyndham. I think it's really important to find someone to own this. So governance and change management is so important. And what I mean by that is not just the overall delivery of the value that you put forth in your ROI, but more importantly, it's that when you go and you purchase these technologies or you do these process improvements and all these folks come to you go with these whiz-bang methodologies, it's very often that they kind of drop them and leave, and they're not on the hook to show the delivery of the value they promised. It's really you. So I think it's most important or most effective when you find a partner that's, even if they're bringing OEM, white label products and services to the table, but that they're going to be the ones responsible for delivering that value, whether it be cost, revenue, customer retention, net promoter score, CSAT, giving someone, that old one throat to choke, but someone who owns the delivery of those things. And then finally to give them, a focus on continuous improvement at all as well. I think that, we can't deliver these kinds of transformational solutions in a vacuum, and they're not static. We need to look down the road. That's why I talk about the 5-year plan. You saw on that FTE waterfall that I showed you that there was a number of different phases to that. And I think it's important to break into the chunks and really work towards continuous improvement and always analyzing so that you can always kind of look back and make sure that you're moving in the right direction. Any questions? Audrey, that was lightning fast and 2 call drops, and I still got through it.
No, that's fine. Actually, as I was working in the background, I did have some folks to apologize for not being able to attend, and I was asked to send over a few questions here. Not only that,
Sure.
but there are folks on the that are in attendance that like some private questions to be asked. So I will respect that and ask the questions. About 4 of them. To be honest with you, we can go back to those slides if you'd like. Let's go back to slide 7. I'll go ahead and navigate back.
Thank you, got it.
No problem. Okay, and on slide 7, the first question is, how do you educate customers on what their needs are? And that's in regards to the second bullet.
Okay. Well, I think one way is just to initiate a call survey. And I don't mean kind of the Net Promoter Score survey where we'll go ask them what they think of our company, but rather the interaction survey after we've had the call. And, you can ask the general question of, did you meet our needs? But I think if we're at the what are the customers' needs stage still, I think it's better to ask pretty open-ended questions like how would you like to have your service delivered in the future? How do you feel about, the interaction with the call center? What is your best interaction? And, these folks, they're not just dealing with you, they're dealing with lots of organizations. So ask them, what's the best customer service experience you have? And how do we replicate that? And, it may not be possible, but I think you'll get a lot of insight and you'll get a lot of buy-in. And I think open-ended questions that are specific to the interaction are important. And stay away from the what do you think of our company questions at that point, because they're going to take it on a rat hole that problems you can't solve.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I think so. We have another question that was just typed into the chat box. How do you deliver a seamless multi-channel experience for the customer? Is it technology?
Yep.
Is it process or people?
Yeah. Hey, Boris, how are you? It's all 3. I think it matters a lot on what your business is and what your sort of primary channel of communication with your customers is. And I think that, as I said before, can be dialed down to each customer, but it needs to be seamless through a couple of different things. Number one is there needs to be some kind of content management or some kind of multi-channel synchronization in the background. I think we can all think of a bunch of different technologies that can do that for us. I've actually seen some that are pretty low cost, that sit out in the cloud, that can take all the customer interactions through whatever channel and serve them up to, number one, the call center agent to make sure that they know that Chris Resendiz called in or Boris called in and was angry about something or was on the web trying to solve a problem. And number two, the ability to sort of retire and promote offers and solutions across the channels as well. So certainly the notion of content coordination across all channels is important. And it's all three.
Perfect. I'm going to jump to slide 13.
Okay.
And the question is, you mentioned KPIs to analyze and to adjust. What KPIs would you suggest for analytics and adjustments?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on what you want your outcomes to be, where you're trying to get. If let's just use let's use the three general ones that I brought up before, which is revenue, retention, and reduction in cost. So I think that the real keys there are, number one is however you measure customer satisfaction today, whether it's NPS or CSAT, I think that's number one. That will keep everybody honest, because without that, you're just measuring number two and number three, which I think is first call resolution. And I think the next is some kind of revenue measure, whether it's retention, lifetime value, number of products owned, although I think Wells Fargo got into some challenges with that. But if we start to measure those three things, so first call resolution, and by the way, resolution is the customer's decision, not ours, right? So we need to ask the customer if the call's resolved. And then third is, some kind of revenue measure, if that's important. I mean, I don't know if your call center is selling, that's one thing, but I think your call center is always retaining. So making sure that we manage retention is important. So some kind of retention or churn measure, certainly first call resolution, and some kind of NPS or customer satisfaction measure.
Perfect. On that same slide, and I'm going to go ahead and get right back on there for you. Uh-oh. A delay there. All righty. I have a request. If you could just define the average lifetime value.
Sure. So lifetime value is the measure of a customer's value to the organization over the duration that they're a customer. So if, for instance, in a telco scenario, it may be 5 years of a customer's affinity to your products or services multiplied by the amount of ARPU or revenue per customer, or might be per household at that point, but per customer. And then in addition, if you're able to do this sort of analytics and this sort of modeling, you can also look at your current customer base, identify what products and services they own after you do your segmentation, and then come up with a potential value as well for each customer cohort. So you could say that the gold customers have the potential to have 7 products, which is an ARPU of $2,600 a year, and their average lifespan is 6 years. You can begin to talk about that and begin to measure effectiveness against retaining and growing those. And that kind of goes back to a thing that I touched on a little bit in my third to last slide, which is keep and grow. It helps you understand who you want to get to, because I think once you segment and you understand the highest lifetime value, we can share with our business partners internally that, hey, these are the customers that really mean the most, make the most, and in our scenarios might even help us drive the least amount of cost and the highest amount of value. That's some of the insights that we can help with our business partners that may not understand what true cost of a client is, until we come to the table and help them understand that.
Perfect. And then one last question on slide 15. And this is a pretty good question here. How important is it to maintain high employee engagement to help with retention?
It's huge. I think we all know in the call center, attrition is our number one killer, right? We train people, we coach them, we mentor them, and then they leave. And we, as much as we look for the sort of identifiers of or drivers of loyalty and satisfaction in our customer base, we should be doing the same sort of analysis within the call center and understand which of our employees are loyal and satisfied. And it's our responsibility to engage them. Employee engagement, when I was working at a much larger company, we had 125,000 agents across the world, and that needle moving 1% was a huge cost. But it may not be the same cost as we're working with 50 or 500 agents, but the number of dollars may not be the same, but certainly the impact on the operation is. So identifying who are our champions, who are the sort of lead horses in there is important. We perform an analysis called, we actually segment and quartile the agent base. We kind of break them into A, B, C's, and D's. We do that by behaviors. We associate those behaviors with the KPIs or the levers in each program that drive the outcomes the customer wants. So rather than maybe measuring who's the best customer, who's the best agent based on some arbitrary things like AHT or even some of the things we discussed, FCR and sales, we may look at what are the best behaviors and how they're driving the best outcomes and resolutions for the customers, maybe on CSAT scores. So it's important to understand that. And then last is, other than just breaking them down into 4 segments, I don't want you to think that A, B, C, and D generally mean that let's get rid of the D's and let's make everybody else an A. I think it's important to take that quartile and maybe break them into deciles, whatever. It's important to understand what's missing in a C that makes them an A or even makes them a B. So understanding what those different segments mean to your customers. You may have a C that's just barely making it, and that just by help coaching them on a couple of different things, maybe they just move up to the B level, but they drive the kinds of outcomes you want, either with retention, customer satisfaction, first call resolution. So really looking at the behaviors, kind of like scaling the test in school to understand what do I really need to do? Because we all know it's expensive to move people out. It's expensive when they leave. Engaging them, whether that means giving them an ice cream party every Friday, or pizza and all sorts of stuff that I know we all do, or finding out what it is they want to do. We implemented a program here called, Dream Maker. I don't know if anyone's ever read the book, but it was a Dream Maker program where we engaged our agents to figure out, hey, what is it that you really want to do? I mean, they're working on our behalf, hard, right, doing the hardest work in the company, which is talking to the customer. And we engage them like, what are your dreams, whether they're financial, whether they're emotional, whatever they are, and help them to get there. And it may seem, I suggest anyone, by the way, to go pick that book up. It's short and easy to read, but it really helps you in employee engagement. It was written by a CEO that did exactly what we're talking about right now, which is figured out, how do I stop all my employees from leaving? And it's a great book, and it worked well for us. That was a wicked long answer, sorry.
It was a nice answer. All right, so are there any more questions or comments for Chris at this time? We'll go ahead and wait a few seconds here and see if there's anybody that's typing anything in before we end. Chris, are there any last words?
No, nothing. I think we're recording this, and I think we'll make some of this information available as well. And you have my contact information. If anyone wants to ask me more questions or anything at all, I love networking and helping anybody else to get this done for them.
Absolutely. So, yeah, this presentation definitely will be available not only on the PACE website, but also on the PACE YouTube channel by 6:30 or by June 30th. And if there is anyone who would like the slide deck prior to that date, please reach out to Chris or Stephanie, and we'll make their emails available, email addresses available, so you guys can have those conversations with him, get some advice from him, talk to him a little bit, and things of that sort. So if that's it, then again, thank you for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, the 2017 PACE Washington Summit is being held at the Renaissance Hotel in D.C. on September 17th through the 19th, 2017. Chris, I'm not sure if anybody from your team is going to be there and be available to chat. Perfect.
I'm going to be there.
Perfect. Then you know what? Team Wyndham professionals will be there for those of you who are attending, so you guys can actually get together and chat a bit. And if there's no other questions or concerns from PACE National as well as Wyndham professionals, thank you for attending again, and have a terrific day.
Thank you.
Thank you.